Hi, everyone, and welcome to Intelligence and Noise, the GSMA Intelligence podcast, where we take a look at the week's news through the eyes of the GSMA CEO newsletter, try to put into context what's important, maybe things that are important that we're not talking about, and as the name would suggest, try and filter through the noise and provide you with some intelligence. I'm Peter Jarich, the head of GSMA Intelligence, and we've got back with us Tim Hatt. It turns out that he was not fleeing the country and going to Belize for anything illegal, or maybe they just kicked him out. I mean, if they kicked you out of Belize, it's that's a real. I don't know what you have to do to flee the country and get kicked back out. But Tim is back. How are you doing, Tim? How was holiday?
Very good, Peter. Good to see you. It was a lovely place to go and see. I almost got trapped at the bottom of a coral reef, but made it back here. So good to be with you.
Wow, that's not a good place to get trapped. So we've got, even though it is the middle of summer and we've passed that middle of July when a lot of Europe begins to go away for their holidays, we actually still have some good news, a lot to talk about. So it's going to be a good conversation. But I'm going to kick off, as is my wont, with a little bit of an anecdote that hopefully sets the stage. So you might remember last week I talked a bit about my saga to find a new phone because I broke the screen on my current one and was confronted with the fact that phones are now a lot more expensive, but not just that, because we all know phones are more expensive because of the memory crisis, but the fact that you're seeing these trade-offs, right? The idea that to make sure phones don't get super expensive, you've got companies who are taking flagships and reducing camera quality or trading off different features. And that was kind of my conundrum. What I didn't end with was, you know, what I'm going to do is just fix the screen on my current one. 130 pounds versus 400 probably makes sense. But what I was struck by as I thought about that, and I think this is a hopeful message, is that as other folks maybe face similar decisions and decide that they want to fix their devices or fix their gadgets versus buying something new because of pricing, that maybe this helps us be a little more sustainable, right? It helps us think more about sustainability. And then on that note, bringing it forward to this week, I think as many folks would know, I spend some time. I have a house down in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of France. That is the region in which Bordeaux is in. And if you're watching this now, hopefully by the time you see this, the fires will have subsided, but they've been pretty bad. Um, and, struck by earlier this year, went to, the TM Forums DTW event, and everyone's talking about, oh, the heat wave crisis, and now the heat wave crisis has turned into a fire crisis, and all these thoughts about, like, how does this make us think about networks, and how does this make us think about things? I think the one story, besides all the difficulties of watching the news and seeing people and animals and everyone sort of flee from these fires, and sort of recognizing that is this the potentially start of a new normal, that obviously there is a sustainability angle, right? And telcos obviously play a part in that, and we're going to come back at the end of this of how this all maybe links together with AI and how this all comes together. But I think more than a sustainability story, because we know telcos have been a part of that, is, for me, although the sustainability part is important, I think what we will continue to see over the rest of this year and going forward is a resilient story, right? And how, as much as climate change is highlighting the fact that telcos play a huge part in the sustainability efforts, that they're going to be playing a bigger part in terms of resilience. And how do we think about building networks to support resilience? How do we think about networks that can withstand not only heat, but are ready with backups in case of emergencies like this, that we're seeing down in Southwest France? And I think we're going to continue to see that. And if nothing else, it helps for me put into context that having to get a new phone is nothing compared to having to get a new house, or having to evacuate your house and wonder about the future of it. So thoughts go out to all of those folks. But with that, let's move on to a more interesting, well, not more interesting, perhaps a more upbeat story. Tim, I think going to, and as I always say, if you're out there and you get the CEO newsletter, congrats, you're important. Going to the one of the two stories that we're choosing to look at, we're talking about voice services, which is a bit weird in an age of AI. So what was the story we want to talk about, Tim?
So it's an announcement between U Plus and Ericsson around embedding AI into the voice capabilities, starting at the network level. Um, Again, it's something we don't often talk a lot about voice when we're in an internet era and now we're in an AI era. But the story here from these two companies is that they are re-looking at how to embed AI capabilities to drive a more immersive experience in the voice channel. And I've got some thoughts on this, Peter, but I think the interesting thing for me is that voice has been sluggish for a while from a revenue perspective. But in many ways, that's kind of irrelevant because most operators have bundled it into all you can eat data plans anyway. So the marginal cost isn't that important. What is important though is the customer engagement and the interaction. And I think that's for me where a lot of the interest is here. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, and for those folks who don't know, because I think the voice agent coming out of LGU plus out of Korea, you might not sort of know what that is, but for the background here, right? It's LGU plus has this voice call AI agent Ixio. They're integrating it with Ericsson's IMS platform, which makes sense. It's how you deliver voice. It does things like scam call detection, right? Hey, this is the scam call. Be careful of it. Voice detection, AI transcripts, AI assistants. My favorite, auto call answering, right? It'll answer a call for you to figure out if it's a call you should take or it's a person or not. I think you're right, Tim, and I think as a lot of folks here would know, the GSMA intelligence team, as part of the strategy function, we're lucky enough to work with a lot of the CSOs and with the strategy group here and back in Barcelona with folks at LGU Plus actually gave a bit of a bit of an explanation and a bit of a showcase to what they're doing with this. And you hit it 100% right. For them, it's about NPS, right? And I think some of the numbers that they have, right, is about, as I'm looking at these numbers, that said, you ended with like a twofold improvement in sort of brand perception. You ended up with churn that was like 1/5, right? They looked at their users since that they introduced this agent early in 2023, and you had like 1/5 the churn on people who were using the app versus others.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think for me, the key part is it's another way of thinking about AI monetization. I've had this conversation with a number of strategy folks and a number of the operators. And when we talk about monetization, 5G monetization, AI monetization, whatever monetization, right? Take your pick. It tends to be a shorthand for how am I going to make more money? Right? People say 5G monetization, and what they mean is, well, how am I making new money from new services on 5G? They're not talking about how
Yeah.
am I actually delivering all the stuff I'd have to deliver anyways more efficiently. And
Yeah.
I'm monetizing by, penny saved is a penny earned. And I think same thing with AI. This is a reminder that monetization can be as much as I've just held on to a whole bunch of customers. And anyone out there with a subscription business, that includes, you and me from GSM Intelligence or a subscription business,
Yeah.
knows churn reduction is keeping those customers that you already have is so much easier than earning new customers. So it's a really, no, I think you're spot on, Tim. It's all about experience.
And I want to go back to a point you made about, your customer experience and ultimately this translating into customer lifetime value. If you have 10% churn a year and you reduce that even by a single percentage point, that scales up to a very big number across a large subscriber base. And so even if you're not making a dollar on the call itself, you're making multiples of that by retaining the customer. I also want to just put this in context for a minute. We've seen attempts at kind of rethinking about voice for several years. We've seen new calling from the Chinese operators. We've seen various attempts to kind of bring in new features through IMS and even from messaging perspective, with RCS. Um, and all of it, all the roads kind of move to how you make it more engaging and more immersive in what is a very noisy world. But I just want to, I'm a data guy. I want to bring in some survey data here from one of our surveys. When we asked people, this was a year ago, around their interest in new features on the voice channel, be that real time translation, be it on emoji engagement, be it on direct immersion with the other party that they're speaking to, we got about 35 to 40% saying very interested or extremely interested. China was the highest, but when you look at the US, you look at Europe, they're not that far off it. And so what that tells me is that, again, people want the channel to be there. It's not just about social media. It's not just about, kind of digital comms. This is good old fashioned voice still has a place. And so I think we're going to see more of this type of activity.
It's a good reminder. I think we hit this, and I'll say the quiet part out loud maybe for you. We know this stuff is taking place in China. You see the Chinese new calling, you see some of the AI call assistants, and we always look at those examples with a little bit of take this with a pinch of salt, because what happens in China is not necessarily applicable outside of China, right? They do some crazy cool stuff there, but this is a reminder that, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe this is one of those things. What we're not talking about here, which I think is an interesting angle, is how does this maybe make AI features more accessible? Here, we're just sort of talking about voice. We're just talking about extensions to your regular voice calls. But if we can make AI more accessible via voice services in developing markets, whether that's for folks with limited literacy or limited phone capabilities, but the one thing that's sort of not spoken about all this that I'd also like to see going forward, and we're not going to have an answer for this, right, is that if the idea here is we've taken what LGU Plus has developed and we're integrating it with Ericsson's IMS, then are we going to see a similar push for a Nokia IMS, for a Samsung? Like how does that portability look? Because right now it's just sort of a LGU Plus with Ericsson. What about other vendors who could benefit, and vice versa, right? If there are other solutions out there, how do they integrate into an Ericsson IMS solution, or how do they integrate with Nokia or Huawei or Samsung or whoever? So I think that this is interesting as a as an interesting use case,
Yep.
but the test for me will be to see who else, right? Because as much as this has been something, and I'm sure that given the fact that they've had this out there for a few years, LGU Plus has, some cool things they're doing that other folks aren't. I know there's all sorts of other folks that will say, hey, take a look at our solutions too. So I think that will be the fun part going forward, is to see how this extends beyond that.
It's a good point. And I think ultimately, zooming out, we're still in the kind of pre 6G, let's try a bunch of stuff before we look to standardize it. Um, your point, though, on how this is interoperable across different vendors and telco networks is a good one. I think for me, I think ultimately we will start to see standardization in the voice as we have in messaging channel. However, I think you're probably going to see more difference between China and the rest of the world. I do see a bifurcation there in terms of how that is standardized. So this will be an interesting test case to see how this moves out to other vendors in the pre 6G era.
Well, and that's going to be key for consumers to understand it, right? To your point in terms of standardization, because from a technology standpoint, I mean, the standards are there, right? I mean, we're talking about integrating into an IMS solution. That's obviously the foundation for voice services, for VoLTE. That's out there. So
Yep.
the question will be, how do we integrate other solutions into that? And what does that standard sort of services look like, so consumers kind of understand? The other part that I'll end on, which is interesting to talk about being pre 6G era, is it is a little bit ironic that we're in a pre 6G era, and yet we're talking about the resurgence of voice services,
Yeah.
right? Of which you don't even need 4G for,
Yep.
right? We're talking about advanced, and I think it is a reminder that that you can layer things on top of what consumers know, and maybe that's going to get you a little bit farther than trying to dream up some new services. But talking about dreaming up new services, of the services, of the stories rather that didn't get picked this week, that could have made their way into the hands and inboxes of CEOs around the world, but didn't, is another AI related story. And I think that's the interesting part here, right? The first one is it's kind of a voice story, but it's an AI story. This one is a infrastructure story, but also an AI story. And it's the news out of Vodafone that and I think so many times we end up talking about here's a solution that has been deployed on one site, but that they've deployed a site and they were making a big deal of the use of robotics and AI on a mast. Meaning,
Yep.
what they've done is they've worked with South Korean firm Humex
Yep.
to attach a robot arm onto a mast in Albania, I believe. Yes, it's Albania outside a shopping mall. And the idea is that the robotic arm can turn the antennas, tune the antennas in real time. Uh, is this the apocalypse? We're now letting robots run our towers. How do you are you worried, Tim? Are you worried about robots on top of towers?
Well, just quick. I'm not too worried about it, but maybe I should be. Just quick for context, Bert. So Peter explained the overall news story here. Vodafone, one of the biggest mobile operators in the world, it's got 375 million connections, predominantly in Europe, but also in Africa and other parts of the world, including India. This trial is in Albania, a relatively small country in its footprint, but nevertheless significant because it can be scaled to other markets. Um, I think it's interesting here because it's an example of telcos running physical AI. Second point, it shows that you can use AI to make concrete cost savings. These are not negligible numbers. When you're an operator, OPEX costs are very significantly set in the RAN. That is the main driver of it, the radio access network. And energy specifically is still about 20 to 25% of that OPEX on average. We know that through our telco benchmark on energy. So what the AI RAN can do here is really help save truck rolls and the manual labor involved in going to retune and adjust the radio frequencies. It can also help deliver a better signal. And that's really what this is about. As you get more congestion in city areas and other urban conurbations, you need to have your spectrum optimized to deliver that. And yes, you can do it manually, but with AI, this is going down, I think, from weeks/months to minutes.
Well, and the to your point, I think the truck roll part is key here because we're not talking about, it's real time, but we're not talking about minutes, right? We're talking about it takes 20 to 30 minutes, they say, to do a significant change in terms of how and that's not nothing, right? But it's not the kind of thing that you're real time millisecond changes. Now that's there as well from different ways that you can work with, let's say massive MIMO, and you can
Yeah.
change sort of beams and beamforming. But this is sort of the kind of thing that you wouldn't be doing daily, you wouldn't be doing hourly, but now heck, you can do maybe hourly because you don't need to roll a truck. Um, I think for me, for me, the big takeaway here is that this really helps. I think it highlights that we've got a whole bunch of terms out there that we're using, and similar to what I was talking about with AI monetization, where we hear AI monetization and people go, "Oh, well, that means how am I making money from AI?" I think this is a reminder that there's a bunch of terms we throw out there that people think they know what they mean, and they think very narrowly, right? So physical AI, right? You gave a good example. This is, you said this is a good example of telcos and physical AI. I'm going to bet you, and I'd encourage you to go out on the street and ask people if they think know what physical AI is. Don't, because I think they'd probably look at you funny. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if you go out and you talk to most people and ask about physical AI, they're like robots.
Yep.
Physical AI, it's robots. Things out in the uh, autonomous things in the real world. No, this is a good example of AI in a physical world thing being used to. It's not sexy. It's not the kind of thing people think about in terms of physical AI. And the flip side is AI ran. right? When we
Mhm.
talk about AI RAN, again, I would suggest if you talk to most people and ask them about AI RAN, they're like, well, AI RAN, that's how am I running my baseband? How am I taking that base station and developing it on AI silicon, similar to some of the stuff that Nokia has talked about and that we've talked about on previous versions of this podcast. And that is one version, right? But then if you talk to Ericsson, they'll say, "Yeah, I mean, we're putting AI in the radios, and that's AI RAN." And this, then you can think of, well, we've got AI which is directly controlling RAN elements at the top of a
Yep.
tower. And so for me, it's a reminder that there's much more nuance to all of these things than we sometimes give it credit.
Yep.
And that's yeah, I think that's important. There's two more angles there I want to get to, but are you thinking this is something we're going to see coming to? And you call that, it's fair. You call it, it's in one market and it's Albania. You don't start with this in downtown. You don't start. You don't go to the middle of London and trial this
Yep.
thing in the middle of London or the middle of Tokyo if you're a Japanese operator or whoever. Right? You start it in a market where if things go bad, it's probably not the worst thing. But are you seeing this thing from an environmental standpoint or efficiency standpoint coming to a market near you anytime soon?
I think 100% we are. It will come in fits and starts, and certain countries will bring it sooner than others. But yes, for the environmental reasons, for the energy cost reasons, and for efficiency and quality of service, all of those four ticks mean we're going to see more. The other point, Peter, I think is worth making here is that when we talk to your point, which is a good one around making an abstract concept real, you know, look at where this potentially expands to. Like we're talking about radio optimization, but what if you applied this type of solution in energy optimization? What if you applied it in terms of how you run a data center or an AI factory? What if it is applied in a fiber context? I mean, I put those questions kind of in a rhetorical lens, but this is going to happen. And so I think for me, the interesting point is not so much if it happens, it's more that's a when. It's more what hard proof points do we get out of the trials that start to feed through at scale in actual operations? And I think this is going to be table stakes before long. The key question will be whether efficacy in the network signal and the customer experience is preserved. And to my point, like how you extend it across different domains of the operator business.
Yeah, like the first part, you're right. I mean, this is about customer experience.
Yeah.
It's how do we, in the example of the mall they gave, how do we make sure that during the day when everyone's in the mall, we direct the signal there, and at night when they're elsewhere, we
Yep.
direct the signal where they are. It's worth noting Huawei has made a lot of push on this site digitalization. How do we digitize actual physical sites? I mean, this is a big part. They talk about sensing and knowing where things are there. This is obviously a big part of that push, which makes me think
Yep.
if we're not hearing it already, that the tower folks are going to want to be in this story.
Yep.
And I think as we think about the tower industries, what they've always been looking for, and tower carriers are always looking for, how can they deliver more value to their customers? How do they actually extract more value from the people who are on their masts? Making these types of solutions available, which have a real ROI for the customers, obviously seems like one.
Yep.
Beyond the idea of obviously, there's a lot of folks looking at, how do you put micro data centers or stuff at the bottom of a tower? I tend to like that idea because I think we are, and I think our work has shown, whether it's the calculators you've done or the people we've talked to, that there's a lot of value in distributed AI, but it's a
Yep.
little bit more speculative
Yep.
compared to, hey, I'm going to attach, and we're calling it robot. Let's just say motors. Let's just be honest. Robot sounds cooler, but we're going to attach some motors to your antennas, and you're going to get some value there. Feels pretty straightforward. Um, what's not straightforward, and I think there's an interesting question here of, okay, and in this case, you've got Vodafone who's been talking about working with a third party, Humex in this case, but the algorithms are their own. Uh, it does bring up a reminder of we've got to be careful of how those algorithms work, and how these systems are either open to integrating different models and what models have access to. And if that wasn't clear and you weren't thinking about that when you read the Vodafone news, and this is when we move to the favorite part of, I don't know, everyone's got their own favorite part of the podcast. I think many of you, that's when we stop talking. But one of my favorite parts of the on our minds, and on the road, and we're not on the road because it's quiet. This leads us to the on our minds section, and making that segue from thinking about what happens when you've got physical things attached to AI and you know what the AI is doing. Big news, unescapable from this last week. Tim, do you have any AI agents who recently broke out of your house and started causing havoc? Or is it just? I mean, I don't. So maybe I'm not doing the right thing. But yeah, we got to talk about AI and open AI, and yeah, what the heck's going
How
on over
could we
there?
not? Yeah, I haven't seen any yet, but how would I see them? I'm going to have to do a double check on the security
Yeah,
front. But for
exactly.
those of you who have seen or haven't seen, this is the story of the OpenAI model that went rogue and unwittingly, from OpenAI's perspective, caused a cybersecurity breach. Um, a group called Hugging Face, which is a sort of AI model repository. No malicious intent, but nevertheless, an incident that I think is a watershed moment because it speaks to a bigger point on how you regulate AI. And Peter, I think the point to make here is that we've seen like AI obviously is capable, particularly as we get towards general artificial and intelligence, what Elon Musk and others are touting as the holy grail. Where is the line between AI is a good thing and AI does its own thing?
Yeah,
I don't think we
and
know that
and
line yet.
no, no. I mean, and I think that's why this story is. There's so many layers to it, and why it is. On the one hand, it feels very post-apocalyptic, apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, because
Yep.
let's just be clear of what's happened, right? OpenAI has got a model. They've got one that's announced, one that's pre-release. They're testing it. They give it a task. They put it in a sandbox that can't get out, because heck, you don't want this thing to do. I mean, you're testing this. This could be really powerful.
Yep.
Uh, the AI says, "Hey, to solve this test, I could really use these things over at Hugging Face, kind of to cheat, right? To basically say, well, I mean, they've got the answers, so hey,
Yep.
best case scenario, I can go out and get. Oh, but I can't do that because I'm locked in the sandbox. Let me figure a way to break out." Right. So you got these models that are saying, one, the best way to solve this thing is to cheat. Two, I can't cheat because I'm broke here. I'm stuck here in the sandbox. So how do I break out of the sandbox? And then it does that, right? Now, haven't seen this very broadly, but apparently it also left notes for future generations of itself on how to break out of the sandbox.
It did.
Like, okay, guys, like, hey, future me, I'm going to save you some time and leave you some notes here on how you too can break out of this testing environment. And then Hugging Face, who's over there trying to protect itself now. OpenAI like didn't know about any of this taking place, which is great until they see the news, and the blog post from Hugging Face. Hugging Face, meanwhile, is going, okay, well, we got to protect ourselves from this thing, but these models that we have access to, these US models, they have guardrails that won't allow us, that won't do the things we need them to do. So I've got to go use a Chinese model to protect myself.
Yeah.
Like that hits it exactly what you're saying in terms of how this stuff is regulated. And it goes to the question of how are those guardrails applied? What do they mean for how we're using this? It is, of course, OpenAI best says, "Hey, we're going to see more of this." I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
I applaud them for being open. I applaud them for putting out a release. Um, for saying they're working with Hugging Face. I applaud the honesty of saying this is going to become more and more commonplace. But if that does not scare you,
You you
that's yeah.
laid it out. You laid out the various touch points there very well, and I know we want to come on to one other story, but I just want to make one other point on this, if I can, on the regulatory side, which is that this story doesn't exist in isolation. And if you look at the question of how to regulate AI, nobody knows yet. Nobody has an answer to that because technology moves faster than regulation. So I think you look at the EU Transparency Act, another big story in the last week. You look on the other side of the Atlantic, US lawmakers want to invoke a kill switch. Okay. So you've got one before the fact, you've got one after the fact. And now you have this incident showing that AI can kind of take a mind of its own. I think what we're going to see is not one overarching piece of AI regulation, but rather multiple layers of it that target content governance, that target cybersecurity, that target provenance, and yes, that probably do look to invoke some type of overarching kill switch if needed, because AI is so embedded into the economy and geopolitical layers now. So this is going to be I don't know what you think, but I think this is a story we're going to see a lot more of in the coming months.
Yeah, which is why it is, I think, particularly, I mean, there are folks out there who, I won't say from a conspiracy theory angle, because it's conspiracy theory, but some are saying, hey, is this OpenAI's version of Anthropic saying, hey, Mythos is really powerful
Yep.
as a potential PR story? Is this just them like highlighting, which I think is a bit hard. Just like I would think they would probably do this in a less scary, a less doomsday-ish version. I think, to your point though, this highlights like as these things get this powerful. I mean, again, I tried to make the link, right? What happens in the future?
Yep.
You have an AI agent that's out there that says, I need to do this. And oh, the best way to do that is to get access to this cell phone tower and turn the antennas up towards the sky or turn the antennas away. It does highlight how we need to be looking at these things seriously and obviously building in the right capabilities, but understanding what they're doing. Because I think for me, there's there's a handful of takeaways there, right? One, we're talking about OpenAI right now. I mentioned Anthropic and Mythos, and a lot of these conversations are around the frontier models. But we know what the history here is, which is the open models, the open weight, open source models aren't years and years behind the frontier. They catch up within 6, 9, 12 months.
Yep.
We talked about that uh, earlier in terms of the Kimi K3 model catching up and all the news it's making. So these capabilities won't just be limited to the frontier for very long, which means, yeah, to your point, people are going to get scared. They're going to think about the regulation side of things, the role of guardrails, how strong or weak they need to be. You mentioned transparency, right? We're going to need to have some sort of agentic transparency. But then again, for me, looping it back to the telco side of things, telcos, recognizing what they need to do in terms of security,
Yep.
right? I mean, there is a larger conversation there, and I was just having this discussion with a major operator last week about how much do telcos need in terms of these models? Like, do they need to be great? Like, do they always need to be chasing the latest
Yep.
frontier model?
Yep.
Do they need to be chasing those models? And for what they're trying to do they need access to the latest? And maybe the answer is for optimization, for customer support, for customer services, maybe not. For protecting yourselves against random agents who are trying to cheat their test and break out, maybe you do need the latest to fight against
We'll
them.
see.
That might be the message.
Yeah.
My story that I wanted to bring, I know you wanted to talk about roaming and rogue agents, but my story that I wanted to come to was apparently Meta was one of the members of the climate groups, RE100, RE100. It's a renewable energy initiative. They're there with a lot of other big companies, but they pulled out It's been positioned as, if I see this correctly, positioned as a joint, mutually agreed upon decision. And I think probably makes sense because it seems like they are, as much as they're still committed and can claim to be 100% renewable, they seem to be focusing a lot more on natural gas as a solution to power a lot of these initiatives in the US. What is it? What are the numbers here? They started with one in Ohio, then for their big Louisiana facility, said they're going to do three and then seven more.
Yep.
So I guess if I'm Meta, I'm saying it's harder and harder for me to claim that I'm aligned with this group. I assume the mutually agreed upon sort of breakup was also part of the group going, "Hey guys, it's hard to have you as part of our group if you're doing this." I don't know. Is this Do we see companies sort of pull? Is AI going to force them to pull back on a lot of the climate commitments?
So I think 2 points here. I think one, you hit it. The optics just aren't great when you are building gigawatt data centers across the US, and yet in the same time being, a leading member of an organization that is trying to move to a renewables world. So there's a sort of point around image management and how that goes. But I think the longer term question is, yeah, how, if you're a hyperscaler or frankly a mobile operator who are in some cases getting into center builds or co-financing or co-lows, how do you manage the energy phasings for that? In the long term, which is 2050, yes, I think most companies do want to still hit net zero and they're committed to that. How you get there has changed because of AI. And I think we're now seeing probably more reliance on fossils and diesel in the short term to facilitate the build, and then pushing out some of the renewables uptake that needs time for the supply to come online. So it's not like getting rid of a target, it's more accepting that the phasing to get to that target is a little bit different. Does that make sense?
And in the near term, it's a lot harder to be part of a group. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm a group and I've got folks who are like, "Look, you're claiming that you're focused on this, but at least in the near term, you're building out these other things." Yeah, it's a lot harder. I guess for me, the other thing I see this linking into, which will be fun to see how it plays out, to your point, near term, right, is that we know from a data center perspective and AI perspective, we're seeing sort of a lot of, NIMBYism. People less and less want these things where they are. We see younger people who just, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. Everyone's probably seen it, right? Billboards and everything saying we hate AI,
Yeah.
right? The sort of pushback against AI.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this with a customer earlier today. We see from our own consumer research that when you ask them where they want a phone, AI is down. It's well below better battery,
Yeah.
better screen, low costs. Link that to the fact that this is or could be linked to climate change. And I think it'll be interesting to see how this all adds up, right? And how this adds up in terms of brand perception. It is obviously an opportunity for telcos. We know telcos have been committed to net zero and committed to being sustainable more than most industries.
Yep.
Feels like it's something to double down on
Yep.
as other folks kind of pull away from this. Cool. Any last thoughts on that?
Well, I just think as a closing thought on that, your point about doubling down is right. I do think the political climate has been kind of difficult to manage from an ESG level the last 2 or 3 years, but I do think that's changing. And what you may not see a lot of PR on this from operators, but the commitments to reduce, energy usage and cost are not changed, and it is for that reason because it is a big cost line. So we're going to see more. We're going to see more on this. The phasing is just a little different.
Yeah, the sustainability side of things would probably, you would suggest, would be one of the winners out of
Yeah.
an ESG focus, if only because maybe some of the people stuff is a little bit more difficult depending upon the market that you're in, and views on DEI and views on the people side of things. But if sustainability is going to help keep your phones in the hands of people for longer, cool. And if it helps to sort of push back against these initiatives, it feels like
Yeah.
sustainability should be the winner, particularly with everything that's going on. Let's just fingers crossed. Well, on that, thank you, Tim. It's good to have you back. Thanks, everyone. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Leave us comments, leave us reviews, tell us what we should be doing better. And as a piece of good news, I will say the long search for a departing tagline. I think we may have come up with one, so let us know. And with that, I will just say thank you all very much. And I would remind you to seek out intelligence, but embrace the noise. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.